on the Jennifer Hudson.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news. We want to show you a live shot of the White House where just moments from now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to arrive for a meeting with President Biden. It is President Zelensky's first trip to this country since his country was invaded by Russia last February. In fact, it's his first time leaving his country since then, and the trip, as you might imagine, shrouded in secrecy amid fears that Russia might try to target him, either coming or going. Shortly after Zelensky's arrival, the two presidents will meet inside the Oval Office, then later this afternoon hold a joint press conference. And tonight, President Zelensky will address a joint session of Congress. Of course, the goal is to drum up further support for Ukraine's fight against Russia. Today, the U.S. pledging an additional $1.85 billion in military assistance, including the first ever transfer of the Patriot air and missile defense system, a quite capable long-range system capable of intercepting high-flying missiles and aircraft from considerable distances. Let's get right to Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander. Peter, this all came together over the last several days.
Yeah, Lester, that's exactly right. This is a dramatic visit, and it's also a pre-holiday surprise. Days of secret planning with President Biden first offering the invitation to Vladimir Zelensky to visit the White House about a week and a half ago, the formal invitation exactly a week ago, but it wasn't finalized till Sunday, and it was so secret that literally until Tuesday night, many of those here at the White House did not know about it, as there were real concerns about the security of Vladimir Zelensky, not just leaving his country, but also arriving here in the U.S. As we see his motorcade now moving, as you indicate, he'll be visiting with President Biden, an opportunity at first to reaffirm the U.S.'s commitment to Ukraine before Zelensky heads to Capitol Hill for that address this evening. And it comes at a precarious time in this war, as Vladimir Putin and the Russians have really stepped up their efforts to try to plunge the Ukrainian people and that whole country into the depths of cold and darkness right now, targeting civilian targets as well as the power grid there. Notably, when President Zelensky goes to the Hill this evening, he will also be speaking to some of his biggest skeptics, including members of the incoming House majority, with the top Republican Kevin McCarthy just yesterday saying that there would be no blank checks beginning in the new year for Ukraine. Among the questions will be for Vladimir Zelensky if he can convince those skeptics that the money is being spent wisely and being spent well, and that this is an effort not just for Ukraine, but for all of the West to push back against Russia. Again, as we wait for Vladimir Zelensky to arrive here now, as you note, this is his first trip outside of his borders since the war began 300 days ago today. Notably, 24 hours ago, he was literally on the front lines in eastern Ukraine, meeting with some of his own Ukrainian forces who provided him with a flag that they had signed and told him to give it to the people of the United States of America. Lester?
Yeah, notably President Zelensky arriving aboard a U.S. military transport, a joint base, Andrew, is under that shroud of security that we have talked about. There, of course, the President and First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, now awaiting the arrival of President Zelensky. Question is, does he have a shopping list of weapon systems that he has previously been denied, but that he still seeks? We'll recall earlier in the conflict, he was hoping to get U.S. fighter aircraft. Here's President Zelensky.
Ready, close. Ready, shut. Ready, face. Forward, forward. Пане президенте, з якими плануєте поїхати до Вашингтона? Пане президенте! Пане президенте, з якими результатами плануєте поїхати з Вашингтона?
You hear questions being fired both, we believe, in Ukrainian and English, but it's to get down to business time for these two presidents now as they enter the White House, the one-on-one meeting with the president, security staff at some point to discuss as well some of the things on President Zelensky's mind. Let's go to Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Richard Engel now. Richard, as I noted a moment ago, there are certain things that Zelensky has wanted in the past. The U.S. has incrementally stepped up the capability of weapons. If he asked for tanks, if he asked for airplanes, if he asked for long-range missiles that could strike inside Russia, would that still be a non-starter in your view?
I think it would be very difficult. He has asked for combat aircraft. He's asked for a no-fly zone. Instead, the United States and other NATO allies have responded by providing missile defense systems. And you just mentioned a short while ago the Patriot missile defense systems. So they have been providing longer-range artillery. There has been a decisive effort recently to provide air defense systems, and they're very effective. I just returned from Ukraine, and the air defense systems are generally knocking down the majority of incoming rockets and missiles. The air defense systems, however, don't stop artillery because it flies too quickly and the range is too short. They don't stop the drones, although Ukraine does have some effective anti-drone technology that is getting better the more they use it. But I think this visit is significant because it allows Zelensky to speak directly, not just to the White House, but to other members of Washington, to reach out directly to the American people. This is a trip that is so long in the making. When the war began 300 days ago, and in the previous days right before the invasion, the United States and other countries, this administration, President Biden, was encouraging Zelensky to leave. They thought he would lose very quickly, that he would have to form a government in exile. President Zelensky has told me this story personally, how numerous heads of state were telling him, it's time to go, the Russians are going to take over your country, you should go. Instead, he stayed, the Ukrainians fought, and incrementally, the United States, particularly the Biden administration, has been providing them weapons, ever sophisticated, ever more powerful weapon systems. So I think this is an opportunity for Zelensky to say thank you to the American people, to say thank you to the Biden administration. And yes, I think there are absolutely some things on his shopping list that he will use this opportunity to ask for.
All right, Richard, I'll ask you to stand by as I turn to Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief Washington correspondent. Andrea, what message is this sending Vladimir Putin, watching these two men on U.S. soil meeting for the first time since the war?
Well, they were literally arm in arm. They are solidly together, that the U.S. is supporting Ukraine going forward, as President Biden has said, as long as it takes. There's another message, of course, in addition to the message of solidarity in Congress, despite some of the things that have been said by Kevin McCarthy, that there's no blank check, that you're probably going to hear much more support from Congress after the tangible, visible, physical presence of Volodymyr Zelensky in the chamber tonight. But the other piece of this is diplomacy. And John Kirby said to me that diplomacy is absolutely on the table, but in the context of not the U.S. pushing Ukraine to give in or concede or to make, some other, deal with Vladimir Putin, but to give him what he needs, to give him the leverage to go head-to-head in diplomacy with Vladimir Putin, that everyone knows that there is no end to this war unless there is something on the table, a diplomatic solution. This is a really careful balancing act. It has to be terribly delicate and artfully done to not appear that the U.S. is pushing him to concede anything, particularly Crimea, which, of course, Russia took in 2014, and go back to those boundaries, going back to before last February 24th. So that is also on the table. Kirby said so. They are not going to concede anything or say that they are pushing him to do anything, but that they have to give him the leverage to let him decide when it is time. And frankly, so far, Vladimir Putin has not been willing to negotiate seriously. There's one other thing, Lester, that we should point out. There's been a lot of pressure around the world, and certainly in the U.S. on particular sides, to for the U.S. to declare Russia and Putin a state sponsor of terror. And what John Kirby from the White House, from the National Security Council, said to me today is that that is something that non-governmental groups do not want. It freezes a lot of action, and it does not permit real diplomacy. So they may agree on something today, which is a sponsor of aggression, since they are the invaders, but not state sponsor of terror, Lester.
All right, Andrea, thank you. As we noted, of course, President Zelensky will cap this visit with an address before a joint session of Congress tonight. Ryan Nobles is our Capitol Hill correspondent there. Ryan, you heard Andrea mention a moment ago, not only is there a message to Russia being sent, but perhaps a message being sent to reluctant members of Congress. President Zelensky well aware that there's going to be a change in power in Washington. What can you tell us about the level of support that he has right now in Congress?
Well, Lester, there's no doubt that there are more members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, that are supportive of the Ukrainian war effort than there are that don't. But the changeover in power from Democrats to Republican in the House of Representatives creates a complicating scenario for the Biden administration and the federal government in general, because there is a vocal and soon-to-be powerful caucus of Republicans that are very much opposed to this idea of a blank check for this war effort, as Andrea talked about. And so the House and Senate are set to pass a massive spending plan here in the next 24 to 48 hours, of which there will be more than $45 billion in aid to Ukraine. But that's the only guarantee of funding that Ukraine has in the near future. And it is going to be difficult for them to convince Republicans to go along with future funding in this next Congress. That's why they want Zelensky here, to make that direct appeal to these members of Congress that are going to be taking power here in the next few weeks. Lester?
All right, Ryan, thanks very much. That video on the left, again, the arrival of President Zelensky of Ukraine just a few minutes ago. The two presidents are meeting now, and again, later we'll see that that address before a joint session of Congress. That concludes this special report. We will join you again throughout the day for updates following meetings between President Biden and President Zelensky, including their joint press conference. Of course, we're following all developments on NBC Nightly News as well. I'm Lester Holt. Good day, everyone.